through today the personal tutor training for those people that are going to be tutoring on the SEND initial teacher training pathway. So we will run through some of the key information first. So like I just said before we started, the structure of the programme is very similar to that of all our ITT programmes. So it is built upon our vision. So our vision being around the child being able to receive that excellent education regardless of background, and that every education professional will be supported. So all professionals are supported working across, within, and our partnership as well to be the very best. So just to reiterate really our values around inspiring learning, the collaboration element of working together and about those relationships that we're forming with all the different stakeholders that we work with. The integrity, so ensuring that we're always acting out with respect, with dignity. There's also that transparency and openness as well, and that we're striving for excellence with those high expectations. So what we want to do in this session today is we want you to be really clear about the personal tutor role and responsibilities. That also will include, and we will touch on today, not to frighten anybody, but we will touch on the sort of role within an Ofsted inspection as well, and what that looks like. Also the importance of monitoring to ensure student teachers have the most sort of high quality training that we can possibly give them, and also support. So we'll be looking at the support system as well as we move forward with the training session. It's about understanding the SEND programme. As I said, we have moved away from the SEND programme being attached to the general primary, so they are seen as two different programmes in their own right. There are some similarities, and anyone who's worked in any capacity with the general primary will see those similarities, but there's also some differences that we will point out as well today as we go through. And just ensuring that you understand sort of the requirements of the role and responsibilities of the personal tutor throughout the course of the programme. And then hopefully people will feel confident, prepared and ready. As I said earlier, there's a lot of information across this training session, so it won't be a case of please don't feel you've got to remember everything. Sort of now you'll be able to dip back into this, and we'll also highlight some key documents, some next steps, and sort of key areas where you'll be able to find all this information as well. So just a little bit about who's who. I'm obviously Vanessa, and I lead primary ITT, and also now the addition of the SEND ITT programme as well. Some of you will be aware of Susie. So Susie Goodman, she's our assistant head of primary ITT and very much overseeing the general primary programme alongside Rachel Globe. We've then got some other faces on here. So we've got Debbie. So obviously most of you hopefully know who Debbie is as our SEND ITT programme lead. We've got Nikki as well on there. So Nikki is, she works at the Gallery Trust. So we work in partnership with the Gallery Trust and the SEND schools across that partnership. And Nikki delivers, so she delivers the SEND webinars. She also writes and redesigns some of the general primary, looking at that with a SEND lens. So she is very much, Nikki and some of the people in the background from the Gallery Trust, so Sue and Harry, are very much involved in the programme development and delivery. We've then got Abby, so new personal tutor for our SEND pathway, and we've got Katie, personal tutor for the SEND pathway. So both Abby and Katie are starting with us very shortly, next week. So very excited to have you both on board. So just going to run through the ITT curriculum. So we've got some snapshots here on what this looks like. So our SEND ITT curriculum, like our primary and our secondary curriculums, are built on the ITT ECF, which is the initial teacher training and early career framework. So those are that's the backbone of all our ITT curriculums. But then what we do is we flesh that out and we basically bring it alive for each programme. So the primary and the SEND do look very similar because the SEND programme is based upon the primary phases. So that is why there is similarity between those two programmes. So any student teacher who is on the SEND ITT programme is working with pupils who are accessing either an EYFS or a Key Stage 1 or Key Stage 2 equivalent curriculum. So the pupils may be older that they work with, but we're looking at the curriculum phase that they are delivering within their setting. So that is why there's that similarity between primary. So this really is just a snapshot just to show how we take the statements from the framework, and we then make those into reflections based on the learn that and learn how to statements that come from the framework, and they then fit within our modules. So we'll look at our modules in a little bit more detail as we move forward. So modules run sort of over the course of 6 weeks, and they're what sort of bring the training alive, because within those modules we can have core training sessions, subject webinars, SEND webinars, enhancements, and sort of other activities around those particular module areas. But that just shows you that there is a rather hefty document that's mapped out in the background, and that enables us then to follow and ensure that our student teachers are progressing towards the teacher standards effectively. So this is it sort of broken down into a much simpler form. So this is our curriculum wheel. Just going back to the vision and values that we looked at earlier, you can see that they are central to our curriculum, and they are central to all our ITT curriculums. We then have, outside of that, we have what we call our core curriculum areas. So we have key areas, and those are, we're able to map the student teacher's progression against those areas with what we call our competencies. And those competencies ultimately lead to the teacher standards. So we'll have a little look at what they look like later, but they are basically the assessment framework for our student teachers. And that's where we're able to use that to set targets to ensure that our student teachers progress towards teacher standards and where we need to get them to. So those core areas are behaviour support and classroom management. We have curriculum delivery that's then broken down into planning, teaching and assessment, and then the development of the teacher. So very much around sort of the professional conduct, but also around developing as a professional. So networking, collaboration, so going back to those values and thinking about our educators being the very best that they can be, and our students also being the very best that they can be. Then you can see 6 thematic modules, so the purple there. So those are what I referred to earlier as those sort of half-termly modules that have a particular theme in which the training then lends itself to that theme, as does the reflection each week, as does the mentor session guides. So the idea behind that is the mentor within school is also able to keep up with where we are in the curriculum and what it is that we are focusing on at that stage of the curriculum and of the student teacher's development. And then you can see on the very sort of outer layer, we do have the framework, because we do obviously have to have fidelity to the framework and ensure that we are compliant as well. And that is sort of the backbone of all our curriculums. Sort of within that then, in terms of sort of the training that the student teachers receive within a module, they have SEND specific webinars. So this is where it's a little bit different from general primary. Because our student teachers on this programme are working in SEND schools, there's a big focus on the broad areas of need. So they have a series of webinars that are specifically focusing on those areas of need. The idea as well for the student teachers on this programme is that they may be in, for example, their employed school, which is perhaps SEMH. And so it might be that when they're having their training, there is particular training elements that doesn't directly relate to perhaps an area of need that their pupils they're currently working with sort of are displaying. But what the aim is of this programme is that the student teachers become SEND specialists. So we have to ensure that they have got that broad coverage across all the areas of need. And likewise, we do have some points in the programme where they're able to develop their knowledge of other areas of need or other SEND schools to ensure that they are becoming those specialists. They then have subject webinars, so similar to the general primary, but they're not joining the general primary like they did last year. These are separate, and there will be a SEND lens at certain points in the programme, and then at other points, for example, leading up to the contrasting mainstream placement, their webinars will become more of a mainstream focus. And lessons learnt from this year around certainly behaviour support and classroom management will be what we'll be focusing on leading up to the mainstream contrasting placement, as well as those core subject areas as well. We've got enhancement webinars, and some of the enhancement webinars, those on the SEND ITT programme will join with those on the general primary. So there is a little bit of joined upness. We also have intensive training and practice, because all ITT programmes need to have that element. The difference being they will not join with a general primary because there are some changes to the focus of those that they'll be looking at on this programme. So they are more SEND focused and yeah, more suited to those who are on this pathway. We have tried to look for time for self-study or independent learning, although it's obviously quite a tight timetable. So there are some elements of that you will be able to see when you look at the overview of the year. We'll talk some more about the mainstream intensive week. So there have been some changes to their contrasting placement from what we've done this year. I think probably the biggest sort of key change here is that they will be in their mainstream placement Monday to Friday once they've completed their mainstream intensive week at the start of their placement in January. There is also absolutely no room for them to move their contrasting placement. So we're going to have to be quite clear on that message right from the start. So going into school and in the sort of induction weeks, being really clear that they know when that contrasting placement is and that there isn't any room to move it because of how this is set up with the support ready for going into a mainstream. And then we've got a new addition this year as well, which is a SEND Spotlight. And that goes back to what I was talking about earlier, which is an opportunity for them to find out about a contrasting SEND school where the pupils have very different needs from those that from their host school. So we have built that into the programme on a particular Friday when they are actually going to organise going into another setting. And then they're going to reflect on that. And it is a SEND school, not a mainstream school for the SEND Spotlight. This is a key document and is going to be very, very handy for you throughout the entire year for any cohort. So this is the June cohort, and there'll be another overview like this later on for the September cohort. But this is a really, really useful document because it gives you a breakdown of week by week and what is happening within that week. So all those different colours that you can see, obviously that equates to different things that are happening. We'll pull out some of those as we move forward with the training, but I just would like to highlight and if you do want to make a note, that is definitely the key document that you will use throughout the year on a week-by-week basis so that you can sort of keep track on what is happening. And also we would encourage you to encourage the student teachers to use this as well so they can see what is happening and what is coming up on that final column, sort of the end column you can see there. That's all the different types of training that happens. The pink bands are the intensive training and practice. So it's also a really good document where student teachers can put dates in diaries and liaise with mentors and things around those activities and assessment points and things that are coming up. Just a slide, really, really useful slide to show you the modules. So we've moved away from numbering the modules as we have done in the past because of the nature of having multiple cohorts. And the challenge when you have multiple cohorts is certainly with our June and our September, they're going to align at a certain point. So we've moved away from numbering And as we love an abbreviation, we have obviously given you the full name of the module and then the abbreviation of that as well. We've also just attached the dates there to when those modules occur across the programme. You'll also be able to see that as well within other documentation as well, but it's really just sort of an overview of when that is happening. You can see, I think, probably the first module for the June, which is high quality assessment, there is actually a bit of an induction sort of leading up to when it starts. So it looks like it starts quite early on, but actually there is a bit of an introduction sort of prior to that. Likewise, at the end, the CPD module, that really is after the practical training. So the overview sort of finishes at the 12th of June, the overview I just showed you on the previous slide, but they can't finish because they're apprentices. And the apprentices on the June cohort, so there have been changes with the length of an apprenticeship, but that doesn't come into play until our September cohort come. So they've got this bit of time, the June cohort, following June into July, where they're preparing for endpoint assessment. So they haven't officially finished. They are actually preparing for this endpoint, and there's a couple of things they need to do on Mosaic in preparation for that to show that in-month learning. So just be mindful they haven't actually finished by that point at the 12th of June. So this really, in a nutshell, is the timeline. So you can see where they start. Then there is a point where they actually align with the September cohort. So they all join for the training. So I think we just need to be mindful with our June cohort, which is small. There are 8 currently. That at some point, so they might feel quite confident in their 8 as they start off, but there's a point where they then join for the training with September. So we just need to be mindful about ensuring that we settle them well at that point where they're also joining with the September. And then, like I said earlier, we mustn't forget about the endpoint assessment, which follows the practical sort of overview of training. And that endpoint assessment is we have external assessors. So Knight, they are external assessors, and they will do our endpoint assessment. And an endpoint assessment looks very similar to the summative assessment that our student teachers do when they are being recommended for qualified teacher status. The difference is it's a stranger coming in because it's an outside assessor. So we just have to prepare them for what is going to happen for the endpoint assessment, and just to ensure that they are feeling settled about an external assessor coming in. It's also really good as a personal tutor to check right from the offset when you go in to do your introduction that they are aware that there is an endpoint assessment and that it does go into July, because some of them will be thinking that once the practical is finished that they've finished. But no, they've got this element to do. So this element is the success of the apprenticeship. So they can get a pass, they can get a distinction, they can fail. We hope that people don't fail, but there is a possibility that it can if things don't go so well on the day. That's the tricky thing around having an external assessor on one day. So we prepare them quite well in advance, but just make sure that your students are aware and the mentors are aware that this element is the element of the apprenticeship. Okay, so going to move on to student progress and assessment. I talked a little bit about the competencies that we use to assess our student teachers. We cannot use the teacher standards until the end of the programme. So we use ITT competencies. And these ITT competencies are mapped to the teacher standards, and they're broken down into those core areas that I talked about earlier. So the behaviour support and classroom management has a set of competencies, as does the curriculum delivery for planning, teaching, and assessment. And then the development of the teacher has a set of competencies. And the idea is that the student teachers assess themselves against these competencies at the start of the programme. They do a baseline against them. And I'll show you shortly a new document that's come into play ready for the June cohort. which helps the student teachers to baseline where they think they are sitting, whether they're emerging, developing, whether they are secure or exceeding. Because especially our apprentices, some of them have quite a lot of prior experience. And so our student teachers are at different stages when they start with us. So they baseline themselves against the competencies in those different areas. It's quite a big document. So again, just make sure that your student teacher is aware of the competencies progression document, and so is the mentor, because it will inform all the other assessment points, because they'll need to refer to it. It will also inform target setting as well. So it'll be a much, hopefully, clearer way of establishing personalised targets for their students' stage of development. I'm just going to show you, I think probably just the last point here on the slide. It helps us as well as a program team to work out where a student teacher is at a certain point in the program and whether that student teacher might need some more support. And that means we can put that support in place early so that we can support their progress in moving towards the secure band, because it's the secure band that is in line with the teacher standards. The exceeding band is actually beyond the teacher standards. So that's sort of the progression and of where our students can get to from secure. But they need to demonstrate they're meeting the development band in those competencies within that term 2. And then by term 3, so basically at the summative points, they have to be secure in all of the competencies. And so they really need to, at the start of that term 3, be showing that they are making that progress into the secure band. So it fits. So we have a document that is called the Primary ITT Competencies Progression Record, bit of a mouthful there. But this is the key document, and this is what our student teachers will be using. You will be using as personal tutors to identify that progress of your student teachers. It will map to the different assessments that you're using on Mosaic, and it also informs the target setting. And we've moved to a model of sharp targets because of the progressive nature, so that we can see that progression as a student teacher moves across the program. And you can see the partnership there between the mentor, the student teacher, and the personal tutor, because all 3 are involved in the progression of our student teachers, and ensuring that our student teachers are progressing, that the targets set are progressive targets, they are suitable targets for our student teachers at that stage. And then, for example, Julie's role as lead mentor will also be sort of QAing that and looking at that and ensuring that that is happening. So that is, I'm not obviously going to go through the entire document, but that's what it looks like. There is also a video that I have done around the progression record and the sharp targets that we will also share with you as well. But just a snapshot here of a curriculum area. So this area is behaviour support and classroom management. So this is what the record looks like for each of the areas. It has what we call our foundational and extended competencies. So that's the those pink items, and that's what we've been using this year. But what we've done is we've just broken it down even further to support the progressive nature of where our student teachers are and where they need to get to, as that has been not as clear this year, with it not being broken down into emerging, developing, secure and exceeding. So each of those competencies now are broken down. The foundational competencies relate to emerging and developing, and the extended competencies are your secure and exceeding. So it's the extended secure, which is where we need to get our student teachers to be by that sort of module, that sort of summative assessment module. So you've got the competencies down the left-hand side within the particular core area. And then you can see on the right-hand side, when we do get to that summative point in term 3, that's where it's mapped to the teacher standards. So you can see how the competencies do relate to the teacher standards. And I think it's really important to ensure that our student teachers also know that. because when they've used the competencies to assess themselves all the way through, they sometimes think that the standards are completely separate when they get to that summative point. So this document will show everybody really clearly how the teacher standards relate to the competencies that they've been assessed against all the way through the programme. So just a bit of information then around what we call our school-based training. We do have a school-based training handbook, which is on the SharePoint with all the resources for you. So we've just pulled out a few snapshots from that, but there is a handbook with all of this information in. So this is the information all around the school-based training element of the programme. And within the handbook, there are, for example, things around teaching percentage and how that builds up across the programme. So something we always get asked from student teachers, schools, is something around how much teaching timetable do student teachers need to have. We're also battling sometimes against apprentices who are being used as sole class teachers. In an ideal world, they would not. They would all be supernumerary and have a class teacher with them. We do know that schools, though, are struggling. Some schools are struggling in terms of budget, so they are using apprentices as sole class teachers, but we do need to be careful of their well-being, their workload, if that is the case. And so that is definitely something to flag as well if you are a personal tutor of someone who is teaching 80%, for example, right from the offset. We must make sure they are getting, for example, their PPA. They are having the opportunity to observe experts because they are not qualified yet. So we'll be able to have those early discussions if that is something that is picked up early on in that introduction meeting, sort of in the first couple of weeks. So this just gives you an idea in an ideal world of how the teaching would build up. And the teaching builds up across a Monday to Thursday because our student teachers have Friday, which is called off-the-job training. The only time they do not follow that model is when those on the SEND programme go into their contrasting mainstream, and then they have a week of training in the first week where they're not in any school, and then they go Monday to Friday in their mainstream. And I've got the percentages of that on the next slide. Here we go. And I think the biggest message really from the mainstream placement around their teaching is we're going to be encouraging that they are team teaching alongside the class teacher right from the offset. We've realised from this year that our students on the SEND ITT programme are really skilled in working with individuals, working with groups. So what it is that they had been finding difficult this year is actual whole class teaching of a class of 30, because that is very different to what some of them have experienced in their SEND schools where there's smaller numbers, more staff. And so, yeah, that was what we've basically learned from this year and built that then into our training for our next cohorts. So team teaching right from the offset, and we will make this clear as well in our contrasting mentor conference that we will hopefully have before they go into this mainstream placement. And the expectation is the team teaching builds up across the programme, across the placement. And so we want to see that independence grow over the course of their placement, but they certainly should not be a sole class teacher on a mainstream placement. So just a bit of a heads up on that. ITAP, so a little bit around this element of our training. So intensive training and practice, there are 4 weeks of intensive training and practice, and these weeks look different to other weeks on the programme overview. They are the pink bands that I highlighted earlier on the programme overview. So first point is to ensure that your student teachers and mentors know when those weeks are, because all student teachers need to be off timetable. So that can be quite challenging for those apprentices who are expected to be 80%, because they need to put something in place to allow them to have the flexibility to do intensive training and practice. It is a mandatory element of all ITT programs, and they need to show that they have engaged in this, that they've done the assessments for this, and they're successful with this element to get qualified teacher status. So intensive training and practice is a new element, and it is the idea behind it is that within a certain amount of time, student teachers really focus on the link between evidence-based theory and their practice. So there's always an element of theory that's looked at early on in the week, at the start of the week. There's then a process of analysis, deconstruction, practice. So there's an element of in-school practice as well, where they are expected to practice whatever the intensive training and practice focus is. They have a practice element, a reflective element. There's always a framework that they use to assess themselves against and what the mentor uses to then be able to feed back against. And then the final point of that week is where the student teacher writes a reflection and does a presentation to their group, a peer presentation. So it is a very different looking week, but it is so those that engage really well in it, the impact is really positive on their practice. And so we want to ensure right from the offset that they're aware that this is happening across the programme. This on the next slide shows you the curriculum aspects that we focus on. So the first one, we focus on the first ITAP that comes up. So that comes up quite early on, and that is around establishing routines. And that's very similar across all our ITT programmes because that sits really well early on in the programme. And it's a real focus on looking at the theory and the evidence-based research around why particular routines work. And then they have a go at practicing the routines within their school, reflecting on those, and always thinking about the research and theory that goes with it. And then you can see some of the other areas that we focus on. So these are now quite different from what we focused on this year, which some of the ITAPs have been in line with general primary, whereas this year they're very bespoke to the SEND programme. So we've got adaptation through the lens of an EHCP, intensive interaction, and we've got sensory processing. So sensory processing is one we've done this year. We've just moved it a little bit later in the programme. So some key documents to be mindful of. All of these will be housed in the SharePoint for you. We have obviously the initial teacher training and early career framework. That is a key document because that is the backbone of the curriculum. That has all the learn how to statements in it. So if you wanted to know what the expectation was in terms of the different areas which link to our competencies, you could spend some time looking at the framework. We also have our training overview, which is the one that I said this will give you a week by week of what is happening across the programme. There is also a SEND ITT programme handbook, which has pretty much everything in it. So that is obviously a go-to for yourselves, for the student teachers and the mentors as well. The progression document is the one that I was referring to with the emerging, developing and secure and exceeding bands in. And there is also a video for you to have a little look at that goes with that and how that relates to our sharp target setting. And then there is the school-based training handbook, and in that it breaks down the different stages of their school-based training. So how they start in their host school and what the focus is and what they look at, what they should focus on, what they should look at. It's obviously got the contrasting placement in and the expectations around that. So another really key document to share or to ensure, sorry, that your personal tutors and mentors are aware of, because we often get queries around school-based training sort of further on in the programme, whereas if they had ensured that they looked at that at the start, that probably would have answered most of their queries. So just some key documents there that you'll be able to find once you go in that shared drive. So I'm now going to have a little break and I'm going to pass you to Debbie, who's going to talk to you about wellbeing.
Thank you, Vanessa. And hopefully you're happy just to move the slides on as I need them as well.
Yeah.
So I am the wellbeing strategic lead alongside the programme lead role as well. So wellbeing is a core offer and focus for us on the programme, more generally across general and SEND. So if we can move on, Vanessa. just to think a little bit about what we mean by well-being. So if we look to the Oxford Dictionary, it's defined as a state of being comfortable, healthy, or happy. And that obviously lends itself towards the SEND ITT program as well. So it's more than just happiness. It's a feeling of being satisfied as well as happy. And that well-being being a development as a person as well. So being fulfilled, but also contributing to a community, which is the core part of how we define well-being as part of the best practice model. So we use this 6-step model of wellbeing to look through that. And we have activities throughout the programme that will tap into these 6 areas of well-being. That self-acceptance, that positive attitude, and knowing what you have as good and less good qualities. So having positive feelings about what you're doing, the autonomy for your own professional development and personal development, and thinking and regulating your behaviour in particular ways. Mastering and having competence in one's environment. And here we're talking about school settings and within your classroom and within those relationships that you hold. Thinking about setting goals and sense of direction through that purpose in life. So really engaging our student teachers in focusing on what is it they want their career to look like and their progression through the programme. And then that personal growth, that continued development, the sense that they are being supported to grow and have new experiences which are exciting as well as daunting at times. So that realization of one's potential as well, all forms that holistic view of psychological well-being. So it's really important as personal tutors that we engage in conversations, discussions and activities that support that well-being growth as well. So we can look at that through looking at that movement from novice to expert. So Vanessa, if we can have a look at the next slide. And we look at that through the theory of Patricia Benner. So that skills acquisition, the program that Vanessa has just been talking to you about, can be very challenging and intense, but also can be very exciting and rewarding. So we talked to the student teachers very early on about that journey from being a novice on the program to being an expert towards those teacher standards. And the journey that might take and the skills and strategies they may need to develop within their reflective practice to be able to be successful. And success will look very different to each of our student teachers as well. So we want to make sure that we are open and honest with them about the challenges, but also the rewards that brings. And one way, and we just looking at the next slide, there's an activity that you can take yourself through, which you can have a look at now, but also take away with you. It's just to think about a hobby or activity that you currently enjoy and take part in, and think about that journey from novice to expert, or where you are on that pathway at the moment. So thinking about how you get better at things, how that process felt, and whether it was linear or spiky. And then how did you make that hobby or that particular skill acquisition consistent? Because becoming the very best at the hobby and activity would have taken some energy and challenge. So talking to our student teachers, which we do on the programme around that journey, can just make them feel a little bit more in control of how they might approach that. And when you go in to do your visits within school, when you have the interactions online with your student teachers, we'll be encouraging you to have those conversations as well. And it's really important to think about the wellbeing more broadly than our student teachers as well. So as wellbeing strategic lead and as a more broader programme lead team, we want to make sure that we're prioritising personal tutors and mentors well-being as well, for the obvious reasons that you're doing a fantastic role, and it's really wonderful to see the development in student teachers, but also that brings development and professional development for yourselves. So you deserve to enjoy the job that you're doing, and also for that to be manageable amongst the sorts of tasks and activities you might be doing more broadly. We want to have student success, but obviously not at a trade of wellbeing challenges or concerns. So wellbeing is a priority, as I say, more broadly in Best Practice Network, but also on the programme, it's a core offer that we take very seriously. And as far as just going into your role is concerned as a personal tutor, if we look at the next slide, we have a model around how you might approach that. And we've produced some videos for our mentors and also designed into our programme times where we will talk through with the student teachers and mentors how the relationship between core people within that programme delivery work together to be able to support further. So we're looking for wise compassion when we're working alongside our student teachers. We understand that the programme might be challenging. We understand there might be times when more challenging conversations might need to occur, but that would be done with wisdom, but also with compassion. So we're looking to get tough things done in a human way. And sometimes one of the things that we work hard with all of our mentors and personal tutors is around just making sure that we stay in that quadrant of this model. Thinking about how we can have that balance, which is crucial to stretching our student teachers to ensure that they can meet the requirements of the programme, but also exceed those if they're able to. But at the same time, doing that in a safe and secure but compassionate manner. So we talk to them about how that might look like in practice in the relationships. And a key part of the personal tutor role is to model that for them. So this might be a model that you'd want to come back to at times along the journey, depending on their pathway through it. So let's touch on the roles and responsibilities a little bit further now. Some of the practicalities of the personal tutor role and the responsibilities that you have. So as Vanessa has already touched on, your role is key in providing support and guidance to the student teacher. And that comes through from your knowledge of the programme, but also your wisdom and experience as being an expert of a teacher prior to this. So you have a range of responsibilities that go in partnership with the in-school mentor alongside the student teacher as well. And what we want to make sure is that that progress is seen within the student teacher, of course, but we also retain our student teachers throughout the programme as well. So your key responsibility will be able to oversee those links between the school and best practice. And you are the conduit for that information. And just make sure that you join the dots between the bits that they can see on their learning platforms in the conversations that they've had in their core training and webinars, as well as their practice within school. And another core aspect is working alongside the in-school mentors. So sharing information again with them and reinforcing information that comes from the central team, but also having honest and open conversations around the progress of individual student teachers. And that may mean challenging your in-school mentor at times in the sense of your wider, broader view of the programme and the competencies that you can see. And also sometimes encouraging them with the progress that their student teacher is making. So you're there to support and advise and also encourage those mentors alongside their student teachers. As I say, that role model professional learning conversations as well, stepping in and having and modelling those conversations if that is needed, and just checking in to make sure that they're aware of the deadlines and that what they are uploading onto the student teachers portal there as well is completed on time and to a high quality. So there's some examples that you can give to be able to support with that, and you will get to know your in-school mentors well and know if they need that additional support. You will undertake joint observations with them at certain windows, which we'll talk you through in a moment. And at times our students might need additional support procedures, either because they have an additional learning need or because they need some additional support support with the programme expectations. And so at that point, we would be requiring you to refer to those procedures and let the central team know if that was necessary. And as Vanessa already mentioned, there's some quality assurance as well, and we would encourage you to engage with that if that was needed. So just a little bit of further information there about the work that you'll do with student teachers. As Vanessa already mentioned, there's a welcome and induction meeting within the school with the in-school mentor and the student teacher. You'll be monitoring that student teacher's attendance and placements and the training sessions as they go through the programme, making sure that what they're being offered in school is in line with the programme expectations, so weekly mentor meetings and weekly lesson observations, and providing that pastoral support, as we said. And also just overviewing the online teaching files in Mosaic, which we can talk you through as well. Some of you will be familiar with those already, during the visits that you make, so that you can see that alongside the student teacher and in-school mentor. And you're maintaining that dialogue through Mosaic, feeding back on the activities that they are sharing there. You obviously complete the recommendation document for the qualified teacher status, so your key role in that, and having that holistic view of the student's pathway through to be able to make that judgment, and obviously part of that preparation and then engagement and with the endpoint assessment, as Vanessa has mentioned already. So what does that look like in practice? Well, there is an online check-in with the student teacher each half term that happens on Teams, and roughly takes around 30 to 40 minutes with experience. There is a face-to-face formal observation that you'll do alongside with the mentor. Formative assessments are completed. They're written reflections, and in fact they've gone to module written reflections on Mosaic. There's subject logs on Mosaic that need checking in on before a school visit, as well as student teachers' reflections on the ITAP week. And a core part of the personal tutor role is to meet with student teachers during the ITAP week to monitor their engagement with that, and also to see their peer-to-peer presentations there and draw together their expertise across those student teachers and their settings. There are 2 learning sequences where student teachers evidence planning and assessment happens towards the end of the autumn and spring terms, and feedback will be required by personal tutors to be able to support them with that. There are interim progress reports, including target setting, which Vanessa has already talked you through. And of course, if a cause for concern arises or there's an additional learning need, there may be some additional support plans and review points as part of that. And you would be encouraged to be part of the setup and monitoring of those, as you know the student teacher best alongside the in-school mentor. There's a final assessment report, and obviously that recommendation for QTS that we were talking about earlier, and an endpoint assessment. And it's important to draw out the difference between the personal tutor role and the lead mentor role as well. So we have Julie on the call today, who is one of our lead mentors, and lead mentors for all of our SEND student teachers and mentors on the June cohort. So the lead mentor, the in-school mentor, and the personal tutor are part of a key set of relationships that support that student teacher in being successful. So Julie, in her role as lead mentor, is there to ensure that those student teachers receive mentoring and support that is consistent across the programme and that's aligned with that ITT curriculum that you've heard about. So it's informed by practice. And so those lead mentors play a key role in the training and support of the in-school mentors. So they will know who your mentor, in-school mentor is, that's linked to your student teachers, and encourage them to attend regular lead mentor meetings to talk through key aspects of their role. And dependent on the school setting, that lead mentor may need to step in a little bit more or step back a little bit, considering what needs they may have. And so they will have an overview of the research, the mentor engagement, and also hold sharing best practice meetings for the allocated groups that they have. And their aim is really to identify that strong practice across our mentors and showcase that, so that we're learning from each other, and that leads to the development of case studies that can be used as well. So that leader mentor role runs alongside that personal tutor role, and as I say, that in school role as well. And if we can move on to the next one, Vanessa. So obviously Julie is linked to the group of PTs for June, so it's good that Julie's here today. Julie will send an introduction email if she's not done that already to the PTs at the start of the programme. And there will be a meeting towards the end of each module to support there as well. So and that's around, as I say, around that consistency of programme delivery, making sure that weekly meetings are happening, session guides are being followed, observations taking place. So that centralised quality assurance spreadsheet is really useful for us to be able to map through and see that things are consistent for our student teachers. And obviously the lead mentors can use that information then to identify any support that might be needed. So a core part of the role, and you will come across lead mentors as you go through your programme as well, and Julie will be able to explain that process a little bit more, or has done already in that introduction email as you go through. And as Vanessa mentioned, not to scare you, but we always think about how Ofsted will feature, or Ofsted inspection will feature within the programme. So our initial teacher training provision can be inspected at any time. There's a lot of interest in the SEND ITT programme as well, so we are very aware of that from the DFE and Ofsted. So from a personal tutor point of view, that role will form an important part of the inspection. So you'll have a key role, obviously, in assessing the student and teacher's wellbeing and progress. That ability to articulate our ITT curriculum and know the programme and whereabouts we are within that at that current point, but also how it joins together. Supporting those in-school mentors within schools alongside the lead mentor. And then highlighting any issues with compliance as we go through, so that can be picked up swiftly to ensure that a student teacher has that consistent approach. And obviously, you're our greatest advocates for our programme and the SEND ITT curriculum. So as you get to know the new SEND ITT curriculum more better, you will be able to articulate that for us, and we are keen to make sure that this new SEND ITT programme best meets the needs of the student teachers that are coming through from specialist settings. And just some practicalities around the personal tutor role. We will be setting up a Teams channel for the personal tutor comms. That is different to what has been in place for this year's cohort, or the current September 24 cohort. We find that that is a really useful way of being able to communicate with you. It will be a small select group for the June, and it's likely that the September cohort will join us into the same Teams channel, which we'll talk through nearer the time. So please do access that Teams channel. I will send out a weekly update around the things that are coming up for that week that you might need to be mindful of. And I know currently our personal tutors find those weekly updates really useful as a ready reckoner for where they are in the programme and what needs doing. Also, alongside that, as Vanessa has mentioned, we've got our shared drive. The shared drive is populated with all of the documents that you should need. If ever there is something there that you feel you would like, then please do let me know and we can add that on. At the moment, we don't put everything in there. We pace you through the programme just so that you can see the wood for the tree. So if you haven't done yet, find that introduction, which you should have had. Introductory email came through a couple of days ago for the shared drive. Just start to familiarise yourself with that shared drive and the resources within it, given that we've talked through some of those today on the training. It's also worth noting that sometimes the documents look very similar to the general primary. That is not the case often, and once you get into them, the detail of those are slightly different. So what we've tried to do as a broader programme is name everything with SEND or general primary at the beginning of it, because some of our personal tutors will be working across both programmes. So we want to make sure that you've got the right document at the right time. So shared, as I say, shared drive is the best place to look for those. Just taking you back to that student teacher curriculum overview. As we said, there is an an initial visit by the personal tutor. That's happening the 23rd of June or the 30th of June. We always give a 2-week window for that, just to be able to support with that. You'll find those, they're orange on that curriculum overview. So going through your diary and just popping those in is a really good idea. That check-in in person, you can organise through an introductory email to the student teachers if you haven't already done that. And there is an example of that within the shared drive if you'd like to cut and paste the introductory email there to give you some consistency. And then alongside that, we also have those face-to-face day windows as well. So you can see those there. So you've got the online check-in, which is the orange, and then the blue is the face-to-face visit window. And again, we give you a couple of weeks to be able to do those. And just gives you, it normally comes towards the end of each module so that you can start to pick up on the evidence there as well. So just 2 things to look out for in that curriculum overview. And that initial visit, the purpose is to set up the relationship in a positive and appropriate way. So it will ensure that the student or teacher has received or is in the process of receiving that school induction. If they're new to the setting, then they may well have just started in that school. We need to be mindful of that. We need to ensure that they've got the setup within their school around mentoring and an appropriate teaching timetable, teaching load and PPA, and the expectation around the ITAPs and also around the Friday off the job training. We want to make sure at that point that the mentor understands their role and where they can access the documentation and training that they need. And also thinking and picking up very early if a student teacher has additional learning support needs, because we want to step in really quickly with that to ensure that they've got what they need with reasonable adjustments to be successful in the programme. So we want to make sure they're settled and they're happy and that they've got somebody that they know well now that's going to go and visit them throughout the programme. And we have a pro forma that will talk you through that with the student teachers so that you are able to pick up on all of those things in the moment of that visit. There's some practicalities around that. As I say, they happen 23rd or 30th of June, tend to take around an hour to an hour and a half for that first initial visit, depending on how prepared your student teacher and in-school mentor are. You will have separate times with the student teacher and mentor as part of that so that they can speak freely about some of the aspects that they're finding a challenge or if they need specific resources. As I say, there's that initial visit pro forma and that primary ITT competencies progression record is a core part of the conversation that you'll be having with them. As I say, here's an example of that initial visit pro forma, and you'll be able to download that from the shared drive and then type into that as you're speaking to the student teacher. Maximise the amount of time that you have. We always set targets and actions from each of those visits that then feed into the next visit. Excuse me. Those subsequent face-to-face day visits, the purpose of those is just to check in regularly regarding the student teacher's workload and well-being, as we've previously mentioned, as well as their attendance. As I say, tapping back in to make sure that they're getting that consistency from the in-school support that they've got there, to quality assure what the mentor is uploading in terms of judgments and student teachers' targets. And making sure that they're related to our core curriculum areas and that competency record. We also want to make sure that they are sharp targets. So we want to make sure that they are written in a way that can show that pace of professional change for our student teachers. So part of your role and those subsequent roles will be just going in and checking alongside that with some performance that we will provide you with. And also, in addition to that, if your student teacher has an additional learning support needs, there will be regular check-ins to review the adjustments that we've made for them. So on the next slide, we've got an example of, oh, did I miss one? No, I did miss one. Sorry, apologies for that. So also we have those windows on that curriculum overview outlined there for you to make those visits. So as I say, checking your diary and making sure they're in advance. It's often useful to put those in advance with the student teacher and in-school mentor as well. Online check-ins take place on Teams. You do not need to record those. But you do need that working device with a camera and mic for those. The documentation for all of those visits will be provided to support you structure that meeting and visit, and you'll find those on the shared drive. And as I say, it's useful to have separate meetings with the student teacher and mentor when you do those visits. And you will get to know the relationship between the student and teacher and mentor to know how to manage that. There's a joint observation at those face-to-face visits. So the way in which they work is you'll do the joint observation alongside the mentor, have a quick conversation with the mentor around that observation, and then watch the mentor feed back to the student teacher, keeping some notes of what you are seeing in that conversation. And then you'll have some time alongside the student teacher there as well to be able to talk through other aspects of the programme more broadly. Here's an example of a lesson observation pro forma. This lesson observation pro forma for the SEND programme is the same as a general primary one. There is no difference in the feedback lesson observation pro forma. Our specialist schools say that it works really well. Most personal tutors will type into this as they're in the classroom because it's the easiest way to sort of collect that information. And when you see the full copy of that lesson observation performer, you will see that further on there's an opportunity for you to make some notes around how the in-school mentor is feeding back at the end of that observation to the student teacher, which enables you to have some clarity around whether that is high quality feedback. Once the lesson observation pro forma is done as well, that is uploaded onto Mosaic, and we'll talk you through that at the time. As I say, ITAP weeks look a little bit different, and there is an assessment of that ITAP reflection. And the personal tutor's role is to assess that student teacher's understanding of that ITAP aspect. Specifically, we are checking that they've developed a strong understanding of the evidence base that was introduced to them at the beginning of the week, and that they're able to articulate and justify and exemplify that in their own practice. We are asking that they're able to discuss that effective practice with the support of the experts that they come across within their ITAP activities. And also that they're prepared to apply that through their practice as the week goes on. As Vanessa says, they're really impactful weeks. They grow in confidence if they fully engage with those ITAP, and it's lovely to see them do that. So the personal tutor's role is to draw that out and build their confidence as they start to see their practice evolve and adapt and refine as the week goes on, once they've started to think carefully about that reading and evidence-based research. So your role will be there to capture that. And the review at the end of that week is reviewing the quality of those after that they have the module reflections, as I say, and the purpose of those is just to see how they've engaged with the program more broadly. So you will be they will be writing some reflections around how the core training has impacted on their practice, what it is that are their current strengths and areas for development, and how they are addressing that proactively within their practice in school and within their reading. So we're looking for that link between the reading and evidence-based research into practice at all points. We want them to think about their wider professional responsibilities here as well, and whether they've accessed any other relevant training through their schools that would be supportive of their evidence-based working towards those teacher standards and competencies. And also thinking about how that support from their mentor and the conversations they're having weekly is impacting on their practice as well. So taking the core training, reading and evidence-based research, and then really thinking about, well, how does that look and how does that look in practice for us within our setting with our pupils as well. So as Vanessa has already mentioned some key documents there, two on the shared drive are really important for you to look out. There is a key dates for personal tutors that talked on a couple of pages, gives you every date for your diary that comes from that curriculum overview, and there's an assessment overview for personal tutors as well. So again, you can see when the deadlines are for your comments on mosaic activities that the student teacher has completed. So two key documents there for you to look out for on the shared drive. And just to reiterate, there are a number of people involved in the SEND ITT programme and more broadly on the ITT programmes as well. So just to be clear, the student teacher progress and attendance would obviously come to Vanessa and I. Student teacher and those additional learning needs, if they are presenting, should come directly to me as the additional learning needs lead. We have myself and Kate Swain, one of our employed personal tutors on the general programme, who oversees student teacher wellbeing and offers sessions for student teachers if they need, and signposting. We are both mental health first aid trained, and are also there, it should also say, for personal tutors and in-school mentors as well. So that is a point of contact with any concerns around student teacher wellbeing. Obviously, we've got Julie. Sorry, Julie, your name is not on there, but Julie is the lead mentor for all of our personal tutors on the SEND ITT programme. And then if you have any concerns around the school placement or whether they've had a change in their Ofsted ranking, which can affect things as well, you'd bring those obviously to Julie or Vanessa as well. So lots of different routes, but obviously different routes for different things. So it's worth familiarising yourself with those. Back to Vanessa, I think.
Thanks, Debbie. Okay, so we are nearly there. You'll be pleased to hear. So just a bit of a summary and next steps for you all. So just a sec. Okay, so just a bit of a summary around the personal tutor role. So I think something that sometimes shocks people is that it is a significant commitment right from the offset. There's no kind of build up to it. It literally is straight in there. And that goes obviously all the way through the end of the programme and right up to that EPA point. Sorry, just a little pause there. Just my dog was coughing. So yeah, a mixture of online and face-to-face visits in each half term. So think of that as each module. So those points on the overview where there's those really crucial check-ins with those key responsibilities. There is obviously a huge responsibility for the monitoring of student teachers' sort of attendance as well as their progress and how they're getting on, because that really informs us quite early on if there potentially are any issues. So the student teachers, we have a new attendance system now, which is on Mosaic, and the student teachers keep a track of their attendance, but as personal tutors, you would have sort of oversight of that just to ensure that there's no issues cropping up there around their attendance. Also, as well, in terms of if they can't attend training, they will be letting you know and sort of the reasons behind that. So just so you can keep a close eye on that. And as a programme, we're also moving this year towards what we call home groups. So the ITAP is delivered in these groups, but also anything outside of that where we want the student teachers to go into their home groups to discuss certain things, that will be an opportunity as well for them to have a group that is a little bit smaller than once they join with the September and become quite a big cohort. So home groups, you'll be able to report any issues if it's flagged to you around attendance with their home tutor, who is also sort of their ITAP tutor. So we're just really covering all avenues to ensure that we can catch anything early on, and just ensure that our student teachers are okay and progressing as they should be. Obviously, a big part of the role is around that oversight of what the student teachers are doing on Mosaic. So really excited that we are now moving towards one platform. We have been using multiple platforms up until this cohort. So this really is the point where it will just be Mosaic. In the background, all apprentices are put on a system called Bud, but our student teachers don't have anything to do with that system. It's just sometimes they get communications about it. So they might say something about, do I need to do anything? There's nothing that they need to do on that. It's all done behind the scenes, but it's just a system that all our apprentices are on. So our system that we are using, the one system for everything that the student teachers do, is Mosaic. And likewise, that's for the mentors to access. So they have a mentor platform as well on there. And yourselves as tutors will have access to your student teachers on there. And it's about keeping your eye on the files that they're collating. So we have evidence files where they're collating evidence towards those competencies that we looked at earlier. Our lead mentor, so Julie, would be able to go in and look at the target setting. So that's part of the lead mentor QA role, to ensure that the correct sort of documentation is being used, the language from the competencies is there. And obviously that's where you will do your marking and your feedback for the student teachers against the different activities that they've got on there and the different formative assessment points that they have on there. So everything is on Mosaic. And we will be showing the student teachers in the sort of first day of learning sessions and the introductory sessions, Mosaic, and doing some navigation around Mosaic as well. And likewise, we'll be able to do the same with yourselves. Talked about this over and over, but it's that early identification. So we want to pick up early. So hence the fact that we have the early visit by personal tutors going into settings to ensure everything's okay. And we have those certain check-in points across the programme, but we also have home groups as well. So we can flag sort of any early identification. Likewise, some student teachers will inform us at the start of the programme in terms of any additional learning needs, but sometimes that does crop up a little bit later. And obviously, we'll be keeping an eye on that wellbeing across the course of the programme for all people involved in our programme. So this is quite a useful slide, actually. This just because it seems quite overwhelming with everything, because we've basically given you the entirety of the role across the entire programme in a very short session. Luckily, you're not going to be tested on anything. But this slide here just gives you the headlines of the first module. So that if you chunk it, so we always say to our student teachers in terms of cognitive science, it's better to chunk things to help you to remember it. Our first module, once we've done the introduction stuff, so remember, actually, there is an introduction first to the programme. But once we get into the first module, which is high quality assessment for June, because the idea behind our June cohort is that they do this module here, and then over the summer, they work on their academic assignments. Whereas the September cohort will do this module later on. So you can see basically for June, this gives you a nice clear overview of what they have coming up in that module. So really that's the first module that you need to look at. So that shows you the dates of the induction webinars, just gives you some key information about other webinars that are happening. So you've got the academic writing webinars and workshops, and that is for all primary and SEND programs because they're all doing the same assignment currently. It's the sort of the same idea. They have one core training on high quality assessment that Nikki does. Nikki and her sort of core team will be delivering that. And then you can see some of the other things that they've coming up there as well around sort of the mentor conference, information about BKSB, which is our maths program for our student teachers. One of the misconceptions with that is that student teachers think about the pupils that they're working with and think, well, I don't know why my maths needs to be at a grade 4. It is a requirement for all ITT programs from the DFE that all student teachers maintain their own professional development at a certain level across maths and English. And so they need to demonstrate. So it's basically a program that ensures that they are at the level that they should be. And if not, it provides some activities, and we can also provide some tutoring to support our student teachers to be at that level. Likewise, the academic writing assignment that I've sort of highlighted early on, that ensures that our student teachers are writing at a particular level. So it is a level 6 assignment. So there is that sort of side to it as well, which really fits with our development of the teacher and development of self, really, and continual professional development. But there is sometimes a confusion about why they feel they have to do that. And it's not, it's more of something that they work on as opposed to they've got to pass a test. It's not an equivalency, because they've already got that to get onto the program, or they've already got a GCSE. It's a maintaining your fundamental skills as a student teacher. Debbie, that's usually your area. Hopefully I gave that justice.
Did it brilliantly.
Thank you. Thank you. I think, yeah. So there you go. Information slide for what's happening first up in the program. So really just some next steps to be mindful of. We talked about the shared drive. That's obviously a key area that you're going to find all the information that we've talked about here. Debbie talked about the Teams, so we'll make sure that everybody is accessing that Teams comms, so that Teams channel, because that's a really good way of, if you suddenly thought, oh, I can't find that, or I'm not sure where that is, or you can put your message on there. Plus Debbie and myself will be able to send sort of messages out to you as well as a tutor team. So just a really good way of keeping communications within the group and making sure that everyone's seeing what they need to see. You have the pleasure of seeing Julie on Teams as the lead mentor for the SEN programme. So lovely that you've been able to make it today, Julie. And really pleased to have you with us as part of the team. And then obviously once you know that you do have an allocation of student teachers, as I said, it's really small for June. So yeah, don't worry, there are more coming. So September is looking like it's similar numbers to what we've got on programme this time. So we've had sort of roughly sort of around the 70 mark for our cohort this year. So obviously the June will combine with that group. And so, yes, it will be bigger and more allocations will be made. So we're in the process of just collating and looking at those numbers. Well, we do that, on a regular basis. So but once you do know, you do have a contact for them, and obviously we have contact for mentors. It's obviously really good to reach out with those introductory emails and sort of yeah, basically introduce yourselves, and those really are the next steps, really. I suppose another next step would be ensuring that, because we've got obviously people here who are not familiar with Mosaic, so we will make sure that we give you the navigation of Mosaic. So Debbie has been very, very busy building the Send Mosaic in the background, which is really great, because obviously this year it's all been in as one with the primary, so it has its own Mosaic cohort, which is very exciting as well. So there we go. We have actually come to the end. We've actually finished a little bit early, so that's always a bonus, isn't it? But obviously you've got our emails there as well. And yeah, going to stop sharing. But if anybody has got any questions, please come off mute and ask some questions, or put anything in the chat. I think we'll stop the recording, but we can always send out any questions, Debbie, can't we, that we feel that might be needed.